Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Episode. Here we're continuing series on the Steam Deck, most importantly what emulators to get set up, how to do it, and what games you should play when those emulators are working. And a few weeks ago I did an Atomiswave tutorial because it's basically a Dreamcast but works completely different on the Steam Deck. And now it's time to talk about the Atomiswave library because compared to the Naomi and especially the Dreamcast, the Atomiswave is much less known but still has some absolutely amazing games. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, the number one game that I want you to play if you never have is Dolphin Blue. It is basically Metal Slug without the Metal Slug franchise, and this game is a straight 10 out of 10 in my opinion. But if you do have a favorite Atomiswave game, leave me a comment down below. I'd be curious to hear what your favorite is. But when I mean this game is just perfect, there's nothing about it that I could critique. All of the gameplay, all of the action, all of the graphics, all of the music are just spectacular. If you like a run and gun like Metal Slug or Contra and you've never played Dolphin Blue before, this is 100% a game you're going to really enjoy. And I do love how they mix together the sprites as well as the 3D polygons. Almost all of the enemies are going to be sprites, but their vehicles and all of the world you're inhabiting is going to be based on polygons. It's all running smoothly at 60 frames per second. Now this is a very difficult game in the same vein of Metal Slug. You are going to die an absolute crap ton of times when you are playing this game, but you're going to have so much fun learning it, seeing the different levels, and starting to get used to the controls and mechanics to the point where you're going to get better at the game and love it when you do so. This is just one of those games that's synonymous with the Atomiswave, and because of that it is quite an expensive cartridge. I've owned my original board and cart for a long time, so I didn't pay near what the asking price is now. But an original Dolphin Blue cart is going to cost you like around $500 to $600 now, last time I checked. Do I think it's worth it? Absolutely. Is it a hard game that you're going to continue a bunch? 100%. But playing it on your Steam Deck under Flycast emulation is an amazing way to experience the game. It's one of those games that takes like 35-40 minutes to see the ending, and it's going to be a perfect game to travel around with because you can just jump in, start playing, have an absolute blast of a time, and just come back to it later. But everything about this game is so much fun. The sense of personality, you shoot those divers with these missiles and they basically explode due to the air. I just love all of the different ways this game has to play. Running around, swimming, riding on a dolphin. It has absolutely everything I want. Now moving on to a completely different genre, Fist of the North Star is one of my favorite 2D fighting games on the system. It has absolutely amazing mechanics, an amazing soundtrack, and some of the best 2D sprite work that the Atomiswave or Dreamcast ever saw. And that's the fun thing about the Atomiswave, is you're going to get a different set of games than you would have on the Dreamcast. There really isn't much overlap whatsoever. But if this doesn't look familiar, it's got huge Guilty Gear vibes as well. But all of the backgrounds, all of the character designs, all of the sprites with all of those different frames of animation just go together to make an absolutely spectacular fighting game. Now of course playing against the AI always fun but a little cheap, but this is the type of thing where you dock your Steam Deck, have a couple arcade sticks, have friends over for a game night, and just start playing it. It is fast, it's responsive, it is wild. It's one of those games where you're absolutely guaranteed to have some fun with it. Well, I guess unless you hate the fighting game genre, then you probably won't have much fun. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite fighting game is. I would be curious, because Fist of the North Star is right up there with me. And this game just has such a vibe. I absolutely love the 2D animations in this game. The background kind of feels a little bit Blade Runner-esque to me here. It is just such a pretty game to look at, and it's such a fast and fluid and responsive fighting game engine to play. There is nothing about it that I dislike whatsoever, unless you are playing against the AI. Like I said, if you're playing against the computer, be prepared by like round 3 just to get yourself absolutely destroyed. Doesn't matter what difficulty you're on, if you don't know the game from start to finish, you're gonna have a bad time. But like pretty much every arcade fighting game, it's so much better with friends. This game works perfect on the Steam Deck, whether handheld and docked, and I can't recommend you play it enough. It's just one of those experiences. Maybe you've never heard about it before, because even though this game is incredibly good, it's not going to get mentioned in the same conversations as something like Guilty Gear, and I'm really not sure why that is. If you're a huge fighting game fan, you certainly know it, but if you're reading lists of really good fighting games to play, I don't see it show up that often, which is a big bummer. Now speaking of run and gun Metal Slug style games, let's just move right to Metal Slug, because Metal Slug 6 came out initially for the arcades on the Atomiswave. We had Metal Slug 1 through 5 on the Neo Geo AES and MVS, and the Atomiswave is basically where SNK and SNK Playmore took their games after the Neo Geo was dead. It has an amazing soundtrack. Go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds. I'll be back and I'll show you some more games.
Heavy machine gun.
Just a great soundtrack, and Metal Slug games always have a spectacular soundtrack. Now, I'm not going to say that this is the best game in the Metal Slug franchise. For me, that's still going to be Metal Slug 3, but tell me down below what your favorite one is. I would be curious. But it's still an awesome entry. It has so much of what made Metal Slug great, like the Mars people here, and it is on just an enhanced set of hardware specs. You're going to get a lot more scaling on an Atomiswave Metal Slug game than you would on the Neo Geo AES or MVS, and it really does work. Although I will say that you have to get through the first like level and a half before the game's personality really shows, because how else are you going to get a burrow in Metal Slug or these amazing flying fish? I just wish that Stage 1 had showed a little bit more of that kind of personality, because from Stage 2 on the game really does open up. But this is just as good as any other Metal Slug game you've played before. The action, the shooting, the platforming, all 100% works on the Atomiswave, and you get a burrow that tows a cart behind it that has what looks like a steam engine powered rocket launcher or cannon on the back. You can't make it up. It is so much fun, although it is quite difficult, and you did see me use a continue there. Now moving on to a beat 'em up game, Demolish Fist. This game is just absolutely insane from start to finish. It is so weird. All of the character designs, all of the enemies, they basically do whatever the hell they feel like as developers, throwing all these different opponents at the screen, and it just 100% works. It has a very similar vibe to something like Final Fight, except it's in full 3D. You can walk up and down into the screen, and that just really does work. But my favorite part of this game is just how many different weapons and power-ups you can get. I will say that it's kind of hard at the top to hit your opponents with those, but pretty much everything in the game can be picked up and thrown, including things that there's no way a human could ever lift above their head. But the great part is, all of the beat 'em up mechanics just 100% work really well. The strikes hit nicely, all of the combos, all of the weapons you can get just do a great job of making those impacts feel nice and meaty. And you can get stuff like electric gloves where you punch your opponent, you electrocute them, or fire gloves. And I'm only showing you the beginning parts of this game because it gets even weird, and if you've never played Demolish Fist, I want you to see it in action and get to experience it for the first time. Because these Cupid doll enemies right here are basically in the first like 2 minutes of the game, and it basically sets the tone for everything you're going to see in Demolish Fist. Everything and anything can happen. It's going to be weird, and you're going to love it the entire time you are playing it. As we move into the first boss fight here, the graphics look great as well. The Atomiswave is basically just a Dreamcast with a different set of hardware connections for arcades versus being a home console. But when you put Atomiswave on Flycast and you up that internal resolution, these games still look spectacular. You can't go wrong with Atomiswave on the Steam Deck, and on the screen it really is vibrant because this game is quite colorful. And you'll see here we have this hyper attack mode where you just mash on the attack button and you can take so much of your opponent's life bar away, especially the bosses. But trust me, if you've never heard of this game before, 100% check it out, because you'll see here as we move into Zodiac Alley, I'm just going to pick up a vending machine and throw it at my opponents. And this is still not the smallest thing you're going to pick up in this game. You pick up part of a passenger aircraft at one point in time, or an entire limousine, but trust me, if you've never played it, 100% check it out. Back to the fighting game genre, we have Guilty Gear X 1.5. Now before you wonder, Guilty Gear Isuka is not going to be on this playlist, and while I don't hate the game, what it did with the mechanics just breaks my brain, and it's not one that I play that much. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you think that's wrong, but you're getting one Guilty Gear and it's going to be X. And just like Fist of the North Star, if you love beautifully animated 2D fighting games that are fast, quick, and responsive, you're gonna love X right here. And it has one of my favorite soundtracks of any fighting game ever made. Arc System Works just knew what to do with music, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds. I'll come back and show you more games and talk more about X. But enjoy. great soundtrack, but I will say you might hear that it's a little bit more muffled, and that's because the Atomiswave uses cartridges and not GD-ROM. So something compared to the Naomi on the GD-ROM system, some of the audio samples might be a little bit reduced, and that's just to keep the cartridge memory size down, because most of these games are right around the 100 megabyte mark, where if it was on a GD-ROM, you'd obviously have a lot more space, close to a gigabyte for all of that storage. But outside of a slightly muffled sound here and there, this game just 100% is incredible. I love how good Arc System Works is at animating character sprites. It really does feel like they are alive on the screen. There's very little jankiness in all the animations, and there's basically no stuttering whatsoever. But there's so many different characters to choose from, so many different movesets, light, heavy, and medium characters to pick from. You're going to 100% find who you like to play as, and you're going to have an absolute blast when you do it. And if you've never played a Guilty Gear game before, this is a great place to start. This was one of my favorites back in the day. I had it on Dreamcast as well, and pretty much anytime there's a new Guilty Gear game, I'm going to pick it up, but it's not a franchise that they've done a ton with lately. Moving on to another fighting game franchise, and that is because the Atomiswave is filled with fighting games, we have Samurai Shodown 6. Now, while mechanically this might not be the best Samurai Shodown game ever made, it is still quite good. I love the sense of humor and the visuals in this game. We are fighting in front of the White House with this horse-drawn carriage right here, as they are building parts of the White House in the background, and that's just because Samurai Shodown doesn't take place, obviously, in the modern era. And if you've ever played a Samurai Shodown game before, you're going to know exactly what to expect. The combat is fast, but also heavier than most 2D fighting games, and this entry is a ton of fun. The stages are very creative, and it has an absolutely huge character roster. All of your favorites are going to be here, as well as a lot of characters maybe you've never used before. But you have different special moves. I whiffed that one there on the block. But everything about this game is just so much fun, and because it is on the Atomiswave and not the Neo Geo, you're going to see that you get a lot higher resolution background art. Some of it doesn't quite match the theming here. This kind of Halloween world, while looking really pretty, kind of feels a little bit out of place in a Samurai Shodown game, but that's just me personally. But as far as the actual gameplay is concerned, you can't go wrong with a Samurai Shodown game. They're all quite good, they're all quite interesting, and when you bring a friend, that's when the games really liven up. Because pretty much every fighting game, 2D or 3D, is always decently fun against the CPU AI until you get bored with that. But this is your game night game. There's so many different fighting games on the Atomiswave that you can run on your Steam Deck. Just pick one or two, invite some friends over, and decide to start playing it. You're going to have fun. And as we move here to Machu Picchu, or at least what I believe is Machu Picchu, I've been there before, it looks like it to me. I just love this game. All of the sprites are so colorful and pop so well against the backgrounds, because all of the backgrounds are well designed and kind of have that little bit of a faded or light color scheme compared to the sheer vibrancy of the character sprites. It just 100% works, it's absolute fun, and trust me, it's a game you want to play on your Steam Deck. Now moving on to another beat 'em up, this time in 3D and 2D, we have Knights of Valor. Now this game series has basically been on pretty much every arcade board ever known to exist, and a ton of console ports as well, but Knights of Valor here, the Seven Spirits on Atomiswave, is a really fun entry. It reuses a lot of the sprites from games in the series that came before it on the PGM, but all of the background, all of the things in the foreground are going to be made out of polygons, so it's a really nice mix of those two different art styles, the classic 2D sprite with the more modern polygon. But again, this game's soundtrack is just absolutely amazing. Go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds or so, and I'll come right back because I got a lot more Atomiswave games to show you. Just a really fun soundtrack and different than everything else I've been letting you guys listen to. And this is one of those games, of course it's a two-player game, it's a beat 'em up, which means it's going to be a great game with friends. But it's also the type of game that you can play as a single-player experience when you're traveling around. Just be prepared for the game to beat you up a little bit, pun very much intended, because this is really designed for two players. And with the additional power of the Atomiswave, this game is just going to throw so many different opponents at you. You're going to have 10, 15, sometimes up to 20 different opponents on screen at once, and you need to manage that entire group. But the great part about this game is it's not just a beat 'em up. There is a little bit of strategy to it, because you can manipulate your enemies to try to stack them up, because once they get on top of one another, you can kill 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 enemies at once with the same attack. And that is where this game really does shine. But if you're looking for a great beat 'em up, you could do a lot worse than this one. Now moving on to a game that is mechanically amazing and graphically a big mistake, the King of Fighters 11 on Atomiswave. And you will see very shortly what I mean by a big mistake, because SNK tried to make their sprites look a little bit better for a modern age without redrawing them. And I absolutely love the King of Fighters as a franchise. I have an entire full set of the Neo Geo games, and I have all the other games as well. So like I said, when you're playing this game, it is so much fun. The character roster is great, but as we move over to the actual gameplay itself, they have tried to smooth their sprites over. All of the backgrounds look incredible, high resolution, all of the pixel art is perfect there, all of the gameplay mechanics and music are great as well, but the sprites are just a smeary Vaseline mess. This was a mistake by SNK, but if you can look past it, it 100% is still an absolute blast of a game to play. And the nice thing is, compared to capturing this on my capture card, when you're just playing in handheld mode, that upscaling doesn't look as harsh. But like I said, it does have an incredible soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll come back because I still got more games to show you. Awesome soundtrack, awesome mechanics, awesome background art. I just wish SNK hadn't bothered to try to upscale these sprites to make it look more modern. Just leave them old and pixelated, we would have been totally fine. And that's the thing, they didn't do this with all the games on the system. Samurai Shodown 6 has that nice pixelated look you saw before, but unfortunately King of Fighters 11 went for the smeary look. Now, talking about a prototype game that I talked about years ago is Kenju. This is a 3D fighting game that never actually released. It is a prototype, and while it does feel 100% finished, there's a little bit of bugs here and there that you might encounter. But this is one of those games that you definitely have to experience, and it is just a blast, not just from a gameplay perspective, because it is a super competent and flashy 3D fighting game, but from a game history perspective, because I'm not sure why this never came out. It is a ton of fun, and I think it would have been successful in the market. Maybe there were just too many fighting games on arcade floors at that point in time, and the developers got a little bit nervous as to whether or not they'd be able to sell it. But luckily it did get dumped and we can play it today. And there is another 3D fighting game that was also unreleased on the Atomiswave, Force 5, and I almost put that in this video, but that one's much less finished and it's much jankier, and it's basically just from a curiosity standpoint. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you ever played Kenju or Force 5, but honestly, if you want to check Force 5 out, you can, just from the curiosity perspective. But from an amazing game perspective, Kenju has everything you need here, and I love the 3D artwork as well, with this pseudo cel shaded style on the character models, all of those harsh lines, all of those really sharp shadows, just have a vibe that 100% works for the game. And it does have an entire story mode as well. That's how finished this game truly is. Every character has a story and an ending, so it maybe feels like this was just at the bug stage of development and it got cancelled right before it was ready to be shipped onto arcade floors. But there's so many different types of characters, different aerial combats you can do. That air dive kick you'll see there in the bottom left and right hand corners. You get to find the character you like, you get to find the way you like to play Kenju, and you're going to have an absolute blast. Just trust me, bring friends though, because the AI is either completely stupid or is 100% going to mop the floor with you. It really does feel like the AI balance was not finished in this prototype version of Kenju, so you're either going to have an absolutely easy time beating the first couple opponents, or suddenly they're going to read every single one of your attacks and have a counter or block for it. But if you like really good 3D fighting games that are definitely a little bit historically fun because they never came out, you're going to love Kenju, take my word for it. Now moving back to the 2D fighting game genre, we have have Neo Geo Battle Coliseum, which is a pivot from the King of Fighters formula, and while it is a really good game, I'm never quite 100% sure what to make of it, so leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. And I could have put King of Fighters Neo Wave in this spot, but Neo Wave is not as good as 11 as far as I'm concerned, and because Neo Wave and 11 are so similar, I decided to pick one game and let Neo Geo Battle Coliseum be the second one. Again, it does the same smeary thing with the sprites, which is unfortunate, but the backgrounds are fun, and it has a weird round style mechanic. You're not just going to be facing 3 opponents and moving on to the next background, you're going to be facing sometimes 4 or 5 opponents in the same area, which kind of makes it feel a little less exciting than a traditional King of Fighters game or something like a Fatal Fury, but it does have its own unique flair, and a lot of the backgrounds are quite good. But bringing in all these different diverse characters from all the different diverse SNK franchises, King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, Samurai Shodown, The Last Blade, it just works, and it does have a great soundtrack as well, and you know I love letting you guys listen to it. So go ahead, I'll be back in 30 seconds because I still got more games. It does have a great soundtrack, but like any SNK fighting game, once you get towards a boss, it's going to become near to impossible because Mizuchi here is just going to destroy me. I can barely get anywhere near him, and that's the thing about an SNK fighting game. Once you get towards the later stages, you basically need to figure out a way to cheese through some of them, but that's every SNK fighting game ever made, and a lot of Capcom ones as well, so I can't really strike it for that. But it's another awesome 2D fighting game on a system that is filled with awesome 2D fighting games, and you can't complain about that. Now, there are 2 racing games on the Atomiswave, but for me, Faster Than Speed is the one that you should play. The other one, it's fine, take a look at it if you feel like it. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think about Faster Than Speed. This is just a game that feels very much like a San Francisco Rush clone mixed with the Fast and Furious kind of aesthetic. It has some great fast racing, a ton of good turns and courses. The only thing it doesn't give me, which I wish it did, were shortcuts, because this has a lot of San Francisco Rush vibes to it in the physics and handling system, and in the overall aesthetic. This kind of feels like Rush 2049 on the Dreamcast, except unlike that game, you don't get all of these crazy jumps and different shortcuts, which is fine. That's what the developers weren't going for, but that's kind of one of my favorite arcade genres. But this game has great mechanics, it's got great physics, and it is a lot of fun. It's basically you racing against one opponent or the timer trying to get to the end, and it's got a great sensation of speed in first person mode. But trust me, when you get in an accident in this game, it is one of the most hilarious things, is there is a little bit of jank around the edges of this game's physics system. When you're actually just driving, everything works perfectly fine, but right here, I just got spun around in every direction possible because a car hit me after hitting my opponent, and things just go absolutely crazy. But that's a lot of fun, though, when things just go off the wall. That's what you'd expect out of an arcade game, and it really does deliver the fun. And because of the Steam Deck's analog control system, you can calibrate the controls in the test menu and it just works. But for me, if there's one game that you've never played before and you're looking into Atomiswave emulation, play Dolphin Blue. And if you need to know how to set the emulator up, check the description below. I do have a video on it to help you guys out. But short of that, leave me a comment and tell me what your favorite Atomiswave game from this video was, and if you're going to play it. I'll be back next Saturday with more Steam Deck videos. I'll have videos throughout the week, but we're done. Bye bye.